The job that devours time. For Emily Carter, the offer from Chronostorm Industries was a gasp of air after months of suffocation. A graduate of a prestigious business school, she had spent 6 months in a fruitless job search, watching her savings dwindle and her student loan debts grow. When an email from the HR director of Chronostorm with the subject line "Interview Invitation" landed in her inbox, she cried with relief. Chronostorm wasn't just a company, it was an empire. Their logo, stylized hourglasses enclosed in a circle, could be seen on skyscrapers from San Francisco to Singapore. The company dabbled in everything from nanotechnology to commodity trading, but its true specialty was shrouded in an aura of mystery. The interview took place at the headquarters in the very heart of San Francisco's financial district. The Chronostorm building was a masterpiece of architectural minimalism, a perfect black parallel piped of polished glass and steel, reflecting the clouds but blocking any view inside. Upon entering, Emily was enveloped by a strange silence. Not the silence that signifies an absence of sound, but the kind that absorbs it. There was no hum of voices, no ringing phones, not even the squeak of doors. The air was crystal clear, sterile and cold. She was led to the office of the Vice President of Strategic Development, Mrs. Evelyn Thornton. The woman behind the glass desk seemed carved from ice. An impeccable suit, a perfect hairstyle, a smile polished to automatism. But her eyes, they were the oldest eyes Emily had ever seen. They held not just fatigue, but an ancient, decades-deep weariness that didn't match her appearance, which placed Thornton's age at around 40-something. "Miss Carter, we are impressed with your resume." Her voice was low and velvety, almost enveloping. "At Chronostorm, we value ambition, and most of all, we value time. Time is the only currency that has real value." Emily, flattered, nodded, trying to hide the nervous tremor in her hands. And then, the day of signing the contract arrived. The figure for the annual salary made her heart beat faster. It was 3 times more than she had expected. She was offered a corporate apartment in a prestigious neighborhood, premium class health insurance, and bonuses she hadn't dared to dream of. "A standard formality," Mrs. Thornton said, handing Emily a hefty folder of documents. "Review and sign." That's when she saw it for the first time. Clause 73B. It was printed on the back of the page in a font so small the letters blurred into a gray stripe. She had to bring the page close to her eyes to make out the words. "The employee unconditionally agrees to a flexible, extended and company-determined work schedule, implying full temporal availability, and acknowledges that the operational needs of Chronostorm Industries may require a revision of the employee's personal time continuum for the purpose of productivity optimization." Emily frowned. "Excuse me, Mrs. Thornton, what does revision of the personal time continuum mean?" The smile on the vice president's face didn't flicker. "Legal jargon from our lawyers, my dear. It means you might have to stay late sometimes to meet deadlines. Nothing more. All our employees sign an identical contract." Seduced by the numbers, blinded by the prospects, Emily signed her name. At that moment, she thought the air in the room thickened for a second, and the expensive clock on Mrs. Thornton's wall seemed to stop for a moment. The first month at Chronostorm wasn't work. It was an initiation into a new reality. Her workday started at 7:30 a.m. and officially ended at 7 p.m. Unofficially, it rarely ended before midnight. Staying late meant working until 2 to 3 a.m. and being at a morning meeting at 8 a.m., fresh and collected. The office had no windows and no clocks. The light was always equally bright, the temperature perfectly constant. Time was measured by deadlines, which succeeded each other at a frightening pace. It was then that the first, barely perceptible glitches in her perception began. The taxi ride home became a blackout. She would get into the car, and the next thing she was aware of was her hand inserting the key into the lock of her luxurious corporate apartment. The 25-minute interval simply vanished, as if cut out with sharp scissors from the film of her life. At first she blamed it on fatigue, but then other fragments began to disappear. She had arranged to have dinner with Mark, her boyfriend, on Friday. On Friday at 6:00 p.m., she finished a report and got ready to leave. A colleague handed her an urgent edit. Emily sat down at the computer and the next moment she remembered was Monday, 8:15 a.m., drinking coffee at her desk with dozens of missed calls from Mark glowing on her phone. The entire Saturday and Sunday had been erased. They weren't filled with sleep or rest. They were simply absent. Mark came to her office. "Emily, what's wrong with you? You disappeared. I called hospitals. I thought something had happened to you." She looked at his frightened, loving face and felt only irritation. His concern seemed like annoying noise, distracting her from work. "I had an urgent project, Mark. I texted you." She hadn't. He left a month later. In her mailbox, an email with the subject, "Goodbye," was waiting. She read it while sorting through her inbox and put the phone aside. There was a sense of loss, but a strangely distant one, as if it had happened not to her but to a character in a book. Her friends stopped calling. Her parents left worried voicemails, to which she replied tersely and rarely. The outside world became ghostly, faded, two-dimensional. The only reality was the Chronostorm office, with its eternal artificial light, the quiet hum of servers and endless streams of data. Her corporate apartment, despite its luxurious appearance, was impersonal, like a hotel room. Food spoiled in the refrigerator, forgotten, replaced by nutrient bars and coffee brought into the office. One night, close to 3 a.m., she finished a complex financial modeling. With a feeling of drained accomplishment, she went to the restroom. Under the merciless fluorescent lights, she approached the sink, washed her face with icy water, and looked up into the mirror. And she screamed. A stranger was staring back at her. A woman in her 40s, with strands of grey in her chestnut hair, with a network of fine but distinct wrinkles around her eyes and mouth, with skin that had lost its firmness and radiance. But the most terrifying thing was the eyes. They burned with the same fire of work obsession, but it was housed in an exhausted, aged face. With trembling hands, Emily fumbled for her smartphone in her pocket. She opened the calendar. Exactly 1 year and 2 weeks had passed since her first day at Chronostorm. She turned on the front-facing camera. The same aged face from the mirror was on the screen. Then she opened her ID badge photo. A smiling, young, hopeful 28-year-old girl. The difference was monstrous. She looked 10, if not 15 years older. She sat on the cold, tiled floor of the restroom, unable to move, until her gaze fell on the Chronostorm badge hanging around her neck. The plastic card with her youthful face seemed like a mockery. And then it hit her. Clause 73B, revision of the personal time continuum. It wasn't a metaphor. She wasn't selling the company her skills. She was selling them her time, her hours, her days, her years. And Chronostorm was devouring them greedily, accelerating her metabolism, burning her life in the furnace of the corporate machine to meet quarterly plans. Her body was aging at an accelerated rate while her mind was immersed in work. They weren't paying her for her labor. They were paying her for her very life. With a wild, animalistic scream, she tore the badge from her neck and threw it at the mirror with all her might. The plastic card bounced off the shatterproof glass, leaving not a scratch. The next morning, unable to contain her hysteria, she burst into Mrs. Thornton's office. You're thieves!" She exhaled, struggling for breath. "You stole 10 years of my life." Mrs. Thornton sat behind her desk, unflappable. The same cold smile played on her lips. "My dear Emily." Her voice was as sweet as syrup and as poisonous as cyanide. "You signed the contract yourself. You unconditionally agreed to the revision of your personal time continuum. Your time belongs to the company. We are simply optimizing its use. But look at the career heights you've reached in this year. She turned the monitor, showing Emily's performance graph, which was soaring upwards like a rocket. That's my life, Emily sobbed. It is a resource, Thornton corrected her. And we pay for it honestly. You do like your salary, don't you? Your apartment, your status? Everything has its price, Emily. At that moment, Emily looked into Mrs. Thornton's eyes, those ancient, tired eyes in a relatively young face, and understood everything. Mrs. Thornton wasn't the executioner. She was a victim too, just one who had worked here longer and climbed higher. Perhaps her passport said she was 45, but she looked a good 60. She had sold Chronostorm even more years. Emily tried to quit. In the HR department, they politely but firmly showed her that same clause 7.3.b, and then clause 12.1 about early termination. The penalty was 3 times the amount of her total annual income, an astronomical sum she could never repay, even by selling all her organs. She was in a debt trap, but the debt wasn't monetary. It was temporal, and it kept growing. She returned to her desk, to her monitors, to her fate. Now walking through the sterile corridors of Chronostorm, she saw it in the eyes of the other employees. The same emptiness, the same premature aging. The young guy from IT whose head was already balding. The woman from the marketing department with a youthful voice and a face bearing the stamp of a 45-year-old. They were walking shadows whose best years were being ground into sand, which Chronostorm turned into profit. They earned money they had no time to spend and built careers that cost them their lives. Sometimes, deep at night, when the office sank into an ominous silence, she thought she heard a ticking, not of clocks but of something else. Louder, more mechanical, coming from the very walls. It was the sound of a huge corporate machine, invisible and insatiable, grinding down the seconds, minutes, years of its slaves. It was devouring their time, their youth, their future. Emily knew that one day she would look in the mirror and see an old woman. And in her bank account, there would be a pile of money with nothing to buy. Because the only value she would want to have, her own youth, her memories, her love, her simple, normal life, had already been irrevocably spent, processed, and turned into lines in a quarterly report for the shareholders. She had sold her time, and the company was devouring it with an insatiable appetite, leaving her with nothing but a stack of bills and ghostly memories of a life she never had.